If there's one genre that seems perfectly built for crowdfunding, or maybe crowdfunding was perfectly built for, it's gotta be the theme park building game. It was never a huge genre, the most notable franchise being Roller Coaster Tycoon, but there was also Sim Coaster, Thrillville, and the simply titled Theme Park. This was all in the 90s though, mostly, and like 3D platformers, the genre has just disappeared one day. That is, until the folks at Texelraptor arrived like the messiah of the theme park builder with Parkitect on Kickstarter. Why did the genre disappear in the first place? What made the Kickstarter so successful? And who exactly is Texelraptor anyway? For that, we're going to have to start at the beginning. In 1999, Chris Sawyer already had 14 titles under his belt, including the cult classic Transport Tycoon. He was working on a sequel when he stumbled on a fun idea. What if I could ride roller coasters all day and get away with it by calling it research? And just like that, a new game was born, Roller Coaster Tycoon, a game all about building your own theme parks. But along with that game came a whole new genre as well. Over the years, new games in the series spawned, like Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 and 3, as well as other companies looking to join the fun with games like Theme Park, Thrillville, and Adventure Park. But none of them were able to really capture what made those first 3 Roller Coaster Tycoon games good. A big part of that was Chris Sawyer himself, stepping away from the genre after Tycoon 2 and working on a third game only as a consultant. But with the influx of mediocre and terrible park building games, big publishers thought it meant that the park building fad had passed, much like with banned games such as Guitar Hero and Rock Band. For a good decade after the release of Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 in 2004, the genre was effectively dead. But bringing back dead genres is exactly what crowdfunding is for. Except for 3D platformers anyway. And like many games seeking Kickstarter funding, Parkitect's beginnings were humble. In March 2014, a guy named Sebastian Mayer was messing around in game development program trying to make the perfect roller coaster physics. And that's when it hit him. What if I turned this into a game? And just like that, Texelraptor was born, and by August of that year, Parkitect was seeking 50,000 Canadian dollars on Kickstarter. A quick look at the Kickstarter page will immediately tell you that development on the game was already at a decent place. There are several screenshots and, better yet, videos showing the game in action. It's clear from this footage exactly what Parkitect wants to be, the next 2D Roller Coaster Tycoon game. The first and second of Sawyer's theme park building games were in the 2D perspective with an isometric camera, whereas the third was in full 3D. Parkitect in particular was trying to replicate the 2D look and feel of the originals. Interestingly, another theme park building game was announced about a year later, Planet Coaster, that was instead going for that 3D look of Sawyer's third game. Suddenly there were 2 and eventually 3 theme park games on the market with the addition of Roller Coaster Tycoon World, but those 2 weren't crowdfunded, so we'll discard them. However, it does go to show what a successful Kickstarter campaign can do. Not only can it kickstart development on one game, but it can revitalize an entire genre. At least when that Kickstarter campaign is good anyway, which Parkitect more than fits the bill of. The campaign went over 13,000 Canadian dollars over its initial budget, which actually kinda seems small to me given how good the campaign itself was. There was a lot of information there, though that being said, Texelraptor didn't exactly have to explain revolutionary gameplay mechanics, did they? They could have just said this is Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 with modern graphics and everyone would have everything they needed to know. Still, you have to commend them for going through the effort anyway. In fact, I remember one of my first articles at Clickist, I talked about how the game was actually too similar to Roller Coaster Tycoon. Silly me. In fact, one of the people working on the game, composer Gordon McGladdery, mentioned this in an interview with some probably terrible website nobody's ever heard of called the Clickist, I think? Don't know. It's weird that a lot of people want to deliver a monopoly to Roller Coaster Tycoon. People don't demand other genres be monopolized by one franchise. Of course, this is more specific than a racing game, but we do keep having to reiterate that we're not making a clone. We're not studying every move RCT makes, their code or their design or their sound. We're making our own game from the ground up with our own custom assets, design, and personal influences. That said, it is guaranteed that people will compare the two because theme park and RCT started and dominated the genre for over a decade. The success of the Kickstarter speaks for itself. People want more theme park sims. There is a lot of cool territory to be explored in this genre, and the market will dictate what should survive. And he's totally right. Why should Roller Coaster Tycoon be the only game in the entire genre? And why should everyone have to keep comparing it to those damn games anyway? You know what? I'm not mentioning RCT anymore during this video, just to prove that point. The campaign succeeded in September 2014, and right on schedule, it hit early access a year later in September 2015. Mods were available from the get-go as well, which is rare for an early access game. We've talked about the disaster of We Happy Few hitting early access before, how the game was widely viewed as broken and how its negative early launch negatively affected its future. However, that hasn't been the case with Parkitect. Much like with its mod support, the positive reviews came pouring in right away. Backers and new buyers alike praised the game for delivering exactly what was promised, and began offering their suggestions. Over the following months, Texelraptor added more and more features to the game, which they're still doing today. If there are any negatives to point out, it's that the early access fatigue has kind of set in. Now nearly a year and a half later, Parkitect is still in early access, without much sign on when the game will be complete, and with regular Kickstarter updates ending in October of last year. That last update mentions things like thunderstorms and new roller coasters being added, and they're continuing to work on single-player scenarios, but overall, development is drumming along at a steady pace, for better or for worse. It's a shame that Plant Coaster swept in and stole some of Parkitect's thunder, because, in a lot of ways, it's kind of the better game. There's more content and more of a challenge in trying to build a functioning park, but still, the game is doing well, with very positive reviews on Steam and a whole bunch of happy backers. And at the end of the day, that's what Kickstarter is all about.